Isolate variables from multivariable equation. So let us get into some complicated equations where there are a number of variables and we need to isolate one of them. So let me make up an equation, and let us say we have an equation which is AB plus BC plus AC equals to 0. Let us say this is our equation, and from this equation we need to isolate what is A. So we need to isolate A from this equation. How can we do it? Now in such an equation you may have to rearrange, right? So we have A in two terms. So there are three terms in this equation, out of which two have A. So if I rearrange, I get AB plus AC plus BC equals to 0. Now I can take A common from the first and second term, thereby getting A with brackets B plus C plus BC equals to 0. So you see, I have made there were two A's in the equation, and therefore it was kind of difficult to isolate A. Now since I have taken common factor, I am able to isolate A. Do you see that part? So that's the beauty of this step. Now we can take away BC from both the sides, so we get A times B plus C equals to minus BC, correct? And now if we divide by B plus C, we can isolate A. So we get A equals to minus B times C divided by B plus C. So that is a way to isolate variable when we have more than one variable, right? So that is kind of very interesting. So that was kind of linear, right? So I'll give you one more example, and this time a quadratic equation, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0, right? Now from this equation we need to isolate x. How are we going to isolate x? As you see, x is in two terms, right? And we need to isolate x. The way to do it is somehow get a factor like this. Some of you who know completing the squares can easily do it. So let's do completing the squares to solve this equation for x. Isolating also means solving equation for the variable. So the steps are, we'll take A common. So when I take A common from the first two terms which have x in them, then what do we get? We get x squared plus b over a times x plus c equals to 0. Now the trick part is completing the squares. To complete the squares, we need to add and subtract half of b over a, right? So we'll do addition of b over 2a, half of, right, b over 2a whole square minus b over 2a whole square, right? That is what we will do to the two terms inside this bracket, plus c equals to 0. Now these three terms form a perfect square, and therefore we can write this as a times x plus b over 2a whole square minus b over 2a whole square plus c equals to 0. Now we can open the bracket. As you can see, we got now only one x in our equations. So that's the beauty of this completing the squares method. So let's open the bracket. So we get a times x plus b over 2a whole square. Let's square this. When you square it, you get minus b square over, so a times, right, a times b square over 4a square, right? Square of 2a is 4a square plus c equals to 0, correct? Let's rearrange this. So we get a times x plus b over 2a whole square is equal to, let's take this on the right side. So a and this a square cancels. So we are left with b square over 4a minus c, right? Now from here we can isolate a. Well, this could be written as b square minus 4ac divided by 4a, correct? We could write that. So let me write down, taking 4a as a common factor. So we get b square minus 4ac divided by 4a, correct? Now we can divide by a both sides. So we get x plus b over 2a whole square equals to b square minus 4ac over 4a square, right? And now this is 2. So what we can do is square root, right? So we are running out of space, so I'm taking this on the left side now. So okay, so let me continue this from here to the left side. So I get x plus b over 2a equals to square root of this. And whenever you do square root, you write plus and minus, and then we have square root of b square minus 4ac divided by 4a square, correct? So what we did is we moved from here to this step. Now we have finally isolated x, and we can write x as equal to minus b over 2a plus and minus. Now square root of 4a square is 2a, right? So this could also be written as 1 over 2a, right? Square root of b square minus 4ac. Now that's a familiar formula, right? So minus b plus minus square root of b square minus 4ac, everything divided by 2a, the common factor. Do you see that? So that is how we can isolate x from a quadratic equation in which x is like this. So let me write down the answer here, which is a familiar one, which is minus b plus or minus square root of b square minus 4ac. Let me push the paper a bit in front, divided by 2 times a, right? So that's the formula. And this method is called completing the squares. So some of you may be familiar with it, and those who just started with isolating variables, for them this could be a very complicated step. So that is completing the squares method. But anyway, the idea is somehow club the terms. If there are at two places you find the same variable which is to be isolated, somehow we have to factor and just get one of them, like we did in these 2 examples. So that is the strategy to work with. So these are the 2 examples which are very typical. I'd like you to go through them, understand the steps. I hope that helps. Thank you and all the best.